I was listening to an orchestral version of Gangster's Paradise, and one of the comments said, well, I'm listening to this, I'm imagining the Italian mafia taking back the streets from the Crips and the Bloods and the MS-13. And I thought to myself, what does this tell us about the nature of the police? That the police are a gang. They are a gang of violent thugs. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, violence is its own domain. That is, we cannot oppose physical measures with non-physical measures. Non-physical measures, meaning the mental, the spiritual, whatnot, all of that can be transferred into the physical realm, that can influence the physical realm, sure. But it's not the same thing, right? So if someone is getting their way by pushing people around, by being violent, I mean, I suppose some people can be martyrs, and some people can set themselves on fire, and some people can, take their own lives, and people can do that kind of peaceful protesting and whatnot. But even peaceful protesting is deceptive because it's about bodies. It's about bodies in the street, right? So it's very flattering. It's about bodies in the street. And bodies in the street is implicitly violent. If you have thousands of people filling the streets, they're peaceful protesters. You're penetrating the alleyways. You are swarming, you are filling up the alleyways with the spermatozoa of the mob. You are passing through the vaginal canal, or whatever it's called, the fallopian tubes of the inner city with your mob. This is a sexual penetrative act. It's an energetic act. It's a physical act. There's no such thing as a peaceful protest. Every protest is the convergence of a group to some degree of organization, because they're at the same place in the same time for a seemingly common purpose, even if that purpose is broad and confused and reactionary and negative in nature, and it's not constructive. There's still some sort of commonality that's brought these people to this place at this time to march together, or to stand together, or to block roads together. So there's always something violent. It's funny, the left will say silence is violence, and I've argued that there's something correct about that. That if people are, if one side is violent and the other side is silent, then the silent side is enabling that violence. But the whole concept of a peaceful protest, by token, if we understand that silence is a form of violence, then what is speaking out? Well, then speech is violent, right? Hate speech is violent. And so what is a protest? A protest is a kind of violence. What is violence? Violence is compulsion through physical means. That's what a protest is. You're attempting to compel the system through physical means, through the physical appearance of people at a certain place and time. So the police, they're a violent gang. And, there's something nostalgic about the Italian mafia, the Irish mafia, versus the Bloods and the Crips and the MS-13, because you feel like you can deal with those people. Because they might be violent gangsters. They might kill you if you owe them money. They might, they might be running drugs. They might be bringing drugs into your neighborhood. They might be doing terrible things. Who knows what they're doing? Who knows what they're up to? But they speak English. They speak a dialect of English you can understand. And it's funny looking back at the time, you know, the nostalgia that one might have for the Italian gangsters, the Irish gangsters, in the context at which those gangs were actually a preeminent force, the reverse was true, right? The reverse was true, such that the Italians and the Irish seemed foreign and un-American. But now, given this, you could say, a geological process of the stratification, or layering of cultures, immigrant cultures, that things which were once new have now become old. And so we look back at Elvis and say he's classic rock. He's the king of rock, the monarch, the the traditional monarch of the rock genre. Rock, that ancient genre, that geological genre. But, of course, Elvis at the time is revolutionary, and the same for the mafias. So we look at the past and we say, oh man, if only the Italian mafia could come back, and if only the Irish gangsters could come back, and they would really clean up the streets, because yes, there would be crime, they would be violent gangsters, but they would be our violent gangsters, and they would not be this kind of resentment that you feel. And again, I'm sure that many Protestants and whatnot felt, living in a gang infested city in the early 20th century, and you're looking around, you're listening to the Italians talking their gibberish, and the Irish doing their Irish thing, and you're listening to this, and I'm sure that at the time, relative to that context, would have felt alienating, and it would have felt it would have felt like foreign, as opposed to, and I'm kind of referencing, the Irishman, which is the last gangster movie I watched. I never really fully reviewed it, I don't think. I might have tossed in some comments here and there, but maybe in one of those 5-hour live streams. I don't think I did a video exclusively on it. And the Irishman, has these Teamsters, which are run by this Nixon supporter. And they're supposed to be this Protestant faction led by this German guy. And in the movie, they have some kind of Italian actor for not DiCaprio. DiCaprio is too young. Is DiGiorno? No, that's a pizza. I don't know what the guy's name is, but he's cast playing this guy who's supposed to be a German Protestant. Whatever. Anyway, it was a good enough movie, and it's got these nostalgic elements, and you look at that and you say, oh, I wish we lived in that world again. Because relative to where we are now, that would be less alienating. Relative to where we are now, we're familiar with that. Those forms of culture have been normalized, and so we say that's normal. And it's actually interesting the way in which 90s rap, things like Gangster's Paradise, have been normalized. And in a sense, that kind of rap, even as these things become layered, right? These geological layers, think of the Grand Canyon, you've got this layering of sedimentary layering, that even rap to an extent has become part of the American culture and the American tradition, and that's what it is. And sometimes people sometimes people will say things like, oh, this mumble rap is so terrible, we need to return to the tradition of Biggie. You've got Kamala Harris up there. Oh, when I was in college smoking weed, I would always listen to Biggie. So, Biggie and Tupac and whatnot. And so people they're like, oh yeah, that was the classic old days where, they really enunciated the words and you could hear what they were saying versus what we've got today. Which is actually, I think, part of a larger lyrical transition in American music. With the invention of radio, I think there was a desire for the lyrics to be very clear when sometimes the audio quality wasn't the greatest. And there's been this transition over time, for whatever reason, to say, let's make the lyrics as obscure as possible. and enunciate. And I think this is true, not just for rap music. I think you're seeing it in all kinds of places. But, maybe it started in rap. I don't know exactly where it started. I'm getting far afield of the topic of gangsters. The police as a group of gangsters, violent gangsters, who rule the streets with an iron fist. I'm not saying, I'm not simply devolving all human society to this. I'm not saying that this should be the exclusive method of societal control, that, we should abolish everything except the police. We should just have pure rule by by armed gangs. Or it would be something like, I never saw Clockwork Orange, but sometimes I'll read the Wikipedia summary or watch a scene, hear a clip, 5-minute clip or something, and you see the Bully Boys, I think they're called, walking around the streets of London. And, that's not the society I'm pining for, the society where there is no law and order but that which comes from direct violence. It's not what I'm arguing for. What I'm saying is that there's always going to be a domain of violence. Now, the interesting thing is the way in which, much like, because working on an assembly line in a factory is a dumb, low IQ job, and what humans are best at doing is intelligence. And what we've been able to successfully do over time is we've been able to domesticate animals, which are biological robots, and we've been able to take manual labor jobs like plowing and tilling and replace those with animals, like horses and, I guess bulls or cows or whatever, and all sorts of things. So we've been able to domesticate animals and use artificial selection to take those animals and to make them do what we want. But now we have these robots, and we're able to use a kind of intelligent design, you might say, to replace manufacturing jobs. And I would say that in some ways it looks like a lot of military work and police work is going to be replaced by robots, which is interesting. What effect that will have, because then you'll no longer need men with the martial spirit, because in order to have, there's a fundamental, it's not merely a physical thing. I mean, you could take a bodybuilder, theoretically, and you could put him out and you could give him a baton or a gun or something. But there's a sort of discipline that you need. There's a certain personality that you need. It's not a pure physicality. It's actually a psychological state. It's a way of being to occupy that martial role, to say, we have an objective. We're going to accomplish it through physical force. We're going to oppose those who oppose us. That is not something that, is merely a matter of gaining the physical prowess necessary, or having the tools at your disposal. But when we automate the warrior class, we are perhaps losing the necessity for that type of masculinity. And I would say there are different types. I don't think warrior masculinity is really the only one. It's a semantic issue, but I don't think it's necessarily productive to define it that way. It's a very purely warrioristic perspective. But what I would say is that, as we automate the warrior class, we're sort of putting all the power in the hands of the merchant class. And I'm thinking of McLuhan here. He talked about the medium as the message. He talked about how technology changes the way we think, how technology I think it was he who said that technology becomes like an appendage. Like the arm is an appendage of the body, the phone becomes an appendage of the head, and so on and so forth, such that we can't be separated from our technology in the same way we can't be separated from the limbs of our body, else we feel pain, we feel physical pain, right? So you see people who they can't get away from it. We feel that on a basic level. And I wonder what McLuhan would have to say about the mechanization of the warrior class, or if he would even understand that kind of terminology, if that would fit in with his schema of societal progress or devolution, depending on how you look at it. In either case, that is, I mean, I think if we have a point where, robots are roaming the streets and robots are dealing drugs, maybe we'll come to a point where and people think that's ridiculous. Robots stealing drugs. I mean, we already have a massive pharmaceutical industry, so don't tell me that's ridiculous. There's very little difference between, the doctor giving you oxycodone and the gangster giving you oxycodone. The difference is, a bunch of fluffy degrees and nonsense like that. And oh, well, the doctors are smart. Okay, well, yeah, they're smart. They're smart. But that to me is fluff. I don't have respect for raw intelligence. I have respect for good goals, and when intelligence is used to achieve that, the goodness that results is not a product of the intelligence, it's a product of the telos. So if I want to paint a beautiful picture and I use my intelligence to discover the techniques and learn the techniques to paint that picture, maybe that's not the best example because I don't think painters necessarily have to have the highest IQ. Although I think there probably is some kind of general motor skills, G factor, whatever. But, if that painting turns out to be beautiful, it's because my telos was good, because I was seeking beauty. If I'm very intelligent, but I have a bad telos, then all that results is ugliness. And in fact, it would be better to be stupid in that case, because you'd fall less. I want to say fall less far, but I don't think that makes sense in English. You would go less. No, go less far. None of these sound right for some reason. Am I speaking the right language here? You would not go so far in the path of perdition. Does that sound better? You would not go so far if you were dumb. If you have a bad goal, if your goal is ugliness, then it would be better that you were stupid. But if your goal is goodness, and you're motivated by good instincts and good feelings and a good identity, and then whatever you do, whether you're dumb or stupid or intelligent, it's all going to be headed in the right direction. And so when people, sort of worship, oh, well, he's got a degree, he knows a lot of things. Yeah, and he's using that to give people painkillers, which, oh, well, it improves the quality of life and blah. How many people have died? It's very frustrating because it's a fundamental starting point that we worship techniques and technology and intelligence as a given, that these things are just good as a given, and that, in this very libertarian way that we just want to increase power. And libertarians would maybe dispute the language I'm using here, but it's all about enabling our capability of agency to do whatever we want, however we want, on an individual basis. But that's a chaos, right? If we want a beautiful world, we need some kind of order. We need to find out what is the best thing that we can do, because, there's an opportunity cost to every bad decision. The question of competition comes in. And I guess you could make the argument on those grounds that multicellular organisms should dissolve into protozoa, because, well, your heart should really be in competition against your liver. They shouldn't, if you force them to work together by some kind of authoritarian scheme, you're losing out on the competitive forces of the free market. The libertarians want to destroy the entire kingdom of Animalia and Plantae. They want to deconstruct biology. That emerged for a reason. There's always market forces on some level. There's always, on some horizon, there's always some kind of thanatos, some kind of death pressure. But the idea that we can't have, authority is just cooperation. The idea we can't have cooperation is a bit ridiculous. But that's that's kind of the direction we've headed as a society. As you said, whatever the doctor says, as long as he's smart, as long as he's read a lot of books, he's got the credentials, then screw morality. Screw the consequences. Screw all of that. The doctor is good. Is right. He is not just another drug dealer. I'm exaggerating for effect, but of course we should hold doctors to a higher standard, and we should call out their sins with a kind of egregious hyperbole, because so much more. We would expect street gangsters to act as they do, but we should expect that men of learning. We do expect that more intelligent people will with great power have great responsibility, as Spider-Man taught us. So, what is this all to say about the police? Oh yes, I was talking about robots dealing drugs and people thinking that's a ridiculous prospect when it's actually quite... I mean, we're going to have robots dealing drugs. It's just a fact. And when the robots are dealing drugs and people are getting high from robot dispensaries, then people, at that point it's going to be like the Matrix. Some people will say, man, I miss MS-13. We're gonna think back, and we're going to think, man, MS-13, they were like knights in shining armor. They were so chivalrous, and yeah, they killed people, just like in the gangster movies. They're always killing people, and they're cruel and whatnot. But man, I wish MS-13, and even the Bloods and Crips, when you've got robots dealing drugs, you're going to wish you had the Bloods and Crips. You're going to be nostalgic. You're going to say, man, those Bloods and Crips, they were so, there was something romantic about them. There was something, heroic and whatever. So it's all relative like that. You're just kind of choosing, you want robot cops? Or robot gangs? Do you want Italian gangs? What sort of gangs do you want? Who is going to occupy this function of gangsterism? You're always going to have a gangster class. Who is going to occupy that position? Who is best suited for that? How should that position be oriented to the rest of society? Open question. Thanks for listening. Thank you for enjoying this nice camera. See, I look much less fat now, and I don't even think my hair looks as my hair just looks like, it's like my hair is as tall as my face. It's ridiculous. Just a bit of change in camera angle here, but this way I have to hold up the phone, with my arms, whereas here I can kind of rest my elbows, so it's a little bit more effort to do this, but that's it. Thanks.